Welcome to this week's edition of the K-12 Change Equation. I'm Dr. Layla Newland, K-12 Change Agent, joined by my co-host and dear friend, Mort Sherman, fellow Change Agent. And today on the K-12 Change Equation, we're honored to welcome a visionary leader whose work is reshaping educational equity and innovation across Michigan. Naomi Norman is the Superintendent of Washtenaw Intermediate School District, where she leads with a deep commitment to ensuring every child is seen for their genius and given the tools to thrive. And I am especially excited because the audience didn't see this when we first dialed in to see each other, but we were giving each other big virtual hugs. Mort can vouch for that because I've had the privilege of knowing Naomi for, I guess, a decade now, right? About that. And a true privilege in watching her career unfold and having the privilege of having a literal seat at the table with her as she was focused on the governor's pre-K to 12 literacy commission, co-founding Mesa Early Literacy Task Force. And under her leadership, Washtenaw ISD has launched groundbreaking initiatives like Talent Together. And for our audience who is regular listeners, you'll remember we had Dr. Serena Shivers on the show a few months ago talking about Talent Together. So I love the intersection. It highlights, one, the power of the community that we've built as change agents. I think that's our common ground, right? And two, how there's all this overlap and intersection in the work that we're all trying to do, which is really in service of our teachers and students. And so, Naomi, I am so incredibly excited that we were able to get you on the show. I know your schedule is incredibly busy. And one of the reasons that Mort and I called you up and said, can you join us for this conversation is we're at this really interesting moment in time. And I use the word interesting broadly. Other adjectives come to mind. But we're at this interesting moment in time where we are seeing so much uncertainty and flux at the federal level. We keep hearing that there will be these block grants given to states. I know that Michigan has increased pupil expenditures, but also has had difficulty passing the budget. So it's this wonky time for states in terms of budgeting. And then between states and LEAs, we have regional education agencies. And I think, I say this as a parent who functions in the day-to-day as a layman in the community, right? I don't think a lot of people understand or know about regional education agencies. They also function in different ways in different states. So we've had a few folks come on and join us. And so today we really want to get the landscape in Michigan. But that's my why for bringing you here. I'm so excited. Mort, I know you also have watched Naomi's career unfold. I don't know if you have any immediate thoughts before we dive in and have her give us the landscape of Michigan for our audience.
Well, Naomi, I just want to clarify, because we do have a national audience, an intermediate agency in Michigan. Is it similar to BOCES in New York and to some of the regional centers in California? Is it a similar structure?
It's a similar structure, absolutely. I think what makes unique, at least Michigan a little bit unique, is we're funded through property tax dollars on a local basis. So we aren't as driven by the specific, like earning money for service that we see in some of our other partners around the country. But the work itself looks really similar. It's service to local districts and getting your arms around the group that you are responsible for and finding out what it is that they need that you can do that would be of value.
I didn't know that you were able to do property taxes and collect funding. So do you also then have fee for service to the districts?
Our particular intermediate school district and most in Michigan have very limited fee for service. I'll give an example, like our technology consortium, we pool our money in order to purchase some things together at a reduced price. So it's basically, I don't know if it's a fee for service as much as...
Well, that's a good example. Yeah. And do you get state aid?
We get some state aid. Yep. Yeah, but relatively small compared to our whole budget.
And there's just one more question because
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated by this. Do you receive your funding, the property tax, through a vote, or
Yes.
you
Yes.
do? So you,
Yes.
as with the local superintendent, have to go out and explain what you do.
We do have to do that, and specifically around whatever that particular vote is around. Yes. I'm in the middle of one of those right now. So
And you're still smiling?
I am. I love our county and our community. They challenge us, but it only makes us better.
Can
How
you
many districts? Sure.
Oh, go
Wait,
ahead. I was actually just going to say, can Naomi tell us a little bit about our community? So I think it overlaps with how many
yeah.
districts, right?
Let's do that.
Give us the landscape of the community that you're serving.
Yeah, we serve 9 local public school districts in Washtenaw County, Michigan, which is where Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan is located. We also have 13 charter schools and a handful of non-public schools. We, as an organization, we are primarily focused on the public school system. Although we talk about this, anyone who's a kid in our county, we're thinking about and making sure that they have access to a quality education.
So,
Do you want to know more about, like, I
yeah.
guess I'll say a little bit more about the 9 districts?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful just as we think about,
Yeah.
we talk a lot about how local context matters when we're talking about
Yeah.
workforce readiness and
Yeah.
meeting the needs of the community. So I think it would be helpful to get a little bit more of an understanding, understanding that having university towns, right, you get research focused community members, but what's the diversity of the community that you're
Yeah.
serving? What are some of the key challenges
Yeah.
that you all are wrestling with at this moment in time?
Yeah, our community is really diverse, and that's actually one of its uniquenesses. We have really tiny districts that are very rural. We have the really suburban, college-oriented Ann Arbor, which is quite large. And then we have more urban-like, I'm not going to call urban, not say it's exactly urban, but more, it's showing up more like our urban districts do, where we have high poverty, high percentage of kids who are kids of color. And we need to, in our role, like, balance across all of those district needs. And it's why equity is such an important issue for us. When we look across our county, we see different performance from these different subgroups of kids, regardless of which district they're in. And we ask ourselves, okay, is that a kid issue? Is that a school issue, a teacher issue, or is it actually a larger system issue? And I'm getting more sophisticated in my whole understanding of how we build systems that don't serve all kids, and trying to find ways to be really explicit together, right? To figure out what is it that we need to do so that every kid matters to all of us.
Naomi, in the notes that you sent leading up to today's conversation, you talked about partnerships and working with communities beyond schools,
Yeah.
which is so interesting as a model. Could you talk about that also?
Yeah. Well, I'll give an example around mental health as one example. Our community mental health program here in our county, they typically serve kids, but not in schools. They're working with families outside of schools. And our community passed a millage for them for mental health. And so we started to partner around some funding we got from the state with the funding that they got through their millage, in order to create tighter bonds between our work so that we can hand off much more seamlessly and smartly between the service we're providing inside school to a need that we know might be outside of school. So that's an example where we're partnering with that organization. Another really great example, I know I mentioned that we are currently asking our voters to fund a career technical education millage. And what we've been doing for the last 3 to 5 years is really strengthening and working with our community partners, business leaders, our workforce development partners, our county government, and then community organizations in order to come together with a vision for what we'd like to see for young people when it comes to career technical education. And so that's been really powerful. And those organizations have been stepping up tremendously to help us think not just 11th and 12th grade programs, but how does that work in terms of work-based learning opportunities, in terms of apprenticeships, in terms of building toward what's possible after high school? How does it look going backwards in our system down to the younger ages? So it's been just really powerful to have those partnerships.
Can we pull on the work-based learning thread? This is something
Yeah,
that I'm
absolutely
actively thinking about. And I was just in Chicago with Dr. Adrian Bustillos, who was on the show early on, where we were talking about career pathing and all the innovation that's happening, but also all of the systemic infrastructure that we don't have in place to really realize this at scale.
Yeah.
Where are you seeing innovation, and what does it look like in terms of success? And part B, what do we still need to figure out?
And you're thinking specifically around sort of that whole career pathway piece. Okay, so I just have to preface this by saying we are a college town. Not only is it University of Michigan, we have a community college here. We have Eastern Michigan University here. We have this culture of the best thing anyone can do is go to a 4-year college, get a 4-year degree, get a master's degree, get a PhD. That's just the learning kind of environment I'm in. And I say that because we have attempted ever since the inception of this organization to do more around creating really robust pathways and infrastructure to support young people who are interested in developing skills, technical skills, career-based skills while they're still in high school. So what we've had to do is really step all the way back, completely back, and say, what is it we're really trying to do in now? Not what we were thinking about from 20 years ago, not what we experienced as students when we were in school, but where are we now? And that's where we pulled together an amazing group of community leaders. And we actually did a 2-day visioning retreat and said, what should school look like now? And how does the idea of building those skills and having kids know themselves, know their passions, how do you get to that place so that school has real meaning and a real sense of direction as they move through the 12 or 13 years of K-12 and then into whatever comes next? So our leader said to us, and it's really clear because it's resonating with the young people, it's resonating with our parents, that we need to create a more applied and experiential learning way of learning and teaching and environments for these young people, all the way from pre-K through to what comes next. We know, and already for kids who are in career and technical education, we already know that 86% of them are going to college. So our community is deeply college or, post high school bound in many ways. So we asked those leaders and they said, we've got to have more experiential opportunities. We've got to give kids a chance to try things, explore things, get to know themselves through doing, so that when they get into high school, it's not just a pathway, it's a web of possibilities for them.
Well,
we're trying to move away from just a pathway, but how do we create this opportunity to go deeper in what they're really interested in? Or maybe they're interested and they realize they don't like it after they try it, right? So that's where we're focusing.
I'm thinking about the headline from 2 weeks ago when the LinkedIn CEO, Ryan Roslansky, said fancy college degree no longer, right? And that we need to shift, our next generation needs to shift their focus from academic pedigree to continuous learning and technical flexibility.
Yeah.
It really has me thinking about, what does that mean then for us in our classrooms? And I think it's so spot on to talk about experiential learning, project-based learning, whatever we want to call it. I think what pains me though, and more, I know you have come out of the superintendency and have pushed some of these initiatives forward. we've been talking about this for a really long time, though. We've been
Mhm.
talking, like, set AI aside. That's right. And even with AI, I think it's just really interesting where 12 months ago, Fortune 500 companies said this is going to transform the workforce. Right now, we're seeing a bit of a step back from that, right?
Mhm.
But we in the K-12 system have this reckoning of like, we don't know where all the dollars are going to come from. We've got declining enrollment. We have increased competition. And the output, and I understand the region that you're working in, and it's very much still college focused, but we also know our institutes of higher ed are struggling right now. So I'm
Mhm.
just curious, what do we have to get in place to push the needle on this? Because it was PBL more when you were in the seat.
Yeah, and let me add to that question. And going back to a phrase you used, Naomi, you talked about the web
Mhm.
possibility. And I love that word. But the idea of the web of possibilities, to Layla's question about whether it's college, 4-year, master's, doctorate, or career technical, that web has a set of skills, a set of dispositions. Is that correct? Do you look at that?
Yeah, so we are thinking about it as what are the stackable credentials? So what do in the elementary and middle school, we're creating opportunities to explore. By the time you get into high school, then we want to create opportunities for you to earn credentials, multiple credentials potentially. Those credentials then can support you into potentially multiple different careers, some of which will go to college, some of which may be workforce and college simultaneously, and some might be workforce directly, college later, or just workforce directly. We're trying to say it's not a dichotomy. It's actually how do we get you to and through college to whatever it is you want to be doing. And along the way, those skills become credentials that as you move through are stackable and they add up over time. They might take you to a dual enrollment class at the community college or the one of the universities where you're earning more credits or credentials, right? There might be some sort of a certification you're getting from that experience you then can take into the workforce while you're going to college and maybe continuing over here. Like examples would be take a computer science, for example. You learn when you're younger that you're really interested in logic. You love the idea of making programs. You get into high school, you take one of those computer science classes, you move into maybe cybersecurity, but you get the credential while you're then moving forward within the high school programming. Maybe you take you dual enroll at the community college and you add to some of those credentials. Maybe you get your Cisco or your different credentials in different areas. And then you go on and you're working as a cybersecurity person while you've decided to go part-time to school to get your engineering degree or computer science degree, right? We want to make it so that those possibilities are open to you and you're earning credentials along the way that are useful to you.
So when you started the answer, I was thinking of E.D. Hirsch's work, the idea of there's a body out there. That was so interesting, controversial, and now archaic. But
Mm-hmm.
if I go, again, I love this phrase, web of possibilities. But if I go through this web, is there a core, regardless of which direction I take, that everybody would experience?
Well, I think of the core as your core set of, we work with our districts on a learner profile. So we say, what are those core things that are so important that when a student graduates from your district, you can be confident they have those skills, right? And they can be basic like literacy, but they're also more expansive in terms of creativity, collaboration, right? We're branching into some of those spaces as well. So that we know that every child is coming out with a set of solid skills that will serve them in whatever they do next, right? Just really solid basic skills. Then they can decide which of these credentials they want to earn along the way.
Where does knowledge, you talk about skills, but what about the core knowledge? Is there such a thing?
Okay, now you're speaking to someone who started an IB school, and we have a whole class on that in the IB curriculum.
On theories of knowledge, TOK.
Yeah, yes, TOK. Yeah, so I think our core curriculum in Michigan really focuses on, I think in a lot of respects, what they want us to be learning from that standpoint, from a core knowledge standpoint. So I think we lean on that in that space.
Right. Yeah, I like your answer. It's such a fascinating and Layla's question. I'm going to throw it back to her. But this idea of like, how do you continue to push? How do you hold accountable? You have to answer the question of skills and knowledge and the core in order to pass a levy in Michigan, right? Yeah. So go ahead, Layla. I'll go back to you. I see your.
No, well, so it's so funny for our audience. We plan this show and we come up with questions and then we just veer off.
We just threw them all
We're
away,
just
right?
throwing them away.
They only gave us permission to do that before.
I know. Well, so I'm going to rattle off a few things and let's just do this here. So here are two things that are nagging at me coming out of the conference that I attended last week, where we were talking about career pathing and this disconnect between strategy and systems.
I like this.
Okay. I was like, oh, I missed my chance with Naomi. Here are the two things that I'm wrestling with. What are the implications for counseling? So guidance counseling, and what do we do there? And educator preparation. Because if we're doing more credentialing and we're providing more opportunities for career pathing, the educators in the building have a different profile than traditional teachers. And there's, I'm always the optimist. I think, well, this could be a really good thing because we have this teacher shortage. What if the profile of person that we need in the classroom isn't actually traditional teachers in every classroom? It's something else. It's nurses. It's people who are trained. So I'm just curious, as we think about this area, how are you thinking about counseling and preparation and professional development? As I think about the systems, the strategy, right, is the web of learning and being able to do that. But I think it also affects the adults and what we need out of them and their skills and training. That's very broad, but I want you two to react to this.
Yeah. Okay. Can I start with I think the educator preparation. Let's just start there because I've been so deep in that space for the last 2 years. I first want to say we have to have lots of different pathways to become a teacher because it opens the door to a lot of people who wouldn't think of doing this kind of work. And the more I've been involved with the career technical education side, where we need to literally hire people who are pilots to teach the drone aviation class, because you have to have the industry experience in order to teach in that field. So it's a whole different group of people than might think, I'm going to go to college and get my 4-year degree and become a teacher. Likewise, I look at some of these amazing paraprofessionals in our community. They are just incredible. And the only thing holding them back from becoming a teacher is they need to work, they need health insurance, and they can't afford tuition. And if I can take care of those three things, I have amazing people who bring a very different lived experience, a very different background, and deep commitment to this community, which I think is part of what's essential here. So I think if we think of it, teaching as a talent pipeline that can be very adaptive and dynamic as we move forward into the future, right? Because I also don't want to get caught up in preparing what I think we need for teachers right now, right? You're describing a very dynamic kind of space. And then find out 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that's not what we need. If we can create these pipelines where we can shape right now as we're going for what we need next, but bring in people who wouldn't normally think of teaching as their profession. I think we'll have more diversity of people in the profession, which allows us to, as a community, adjust going forward because we're bringing all those different perspectives together. Does that make sense? Because I'm this huge believer that the only people who can really change a system are the people in the system. And so we need that really strong, diverse voice within our system in order to tackle the emergent challenges and changes that are happening. The rest is all around how we structure to come together to do that.
I love that.
So there's an article in today's Washington Post that really ticked me off. And I could probably pick up any paper across the country and find an article that really ticks me off. But this one was by somebody who was writing about the 22,000 students they have in charter programs in New York City. Said, hooray, hooray, 22,000. That's a small district in most of America, right? Way to go. But they were talking then about Florida's system of charter schools and pushing it in a really positive way. And there are some really good things that are happening there, particularly with all the empty classrooms, all the empty schools. I think Florida's actually thinking this one through the way many other states are not. However, the person was saying that the beauty of charter schools is that they get to think about excellence. And shouldn't we, throughout education, think about excellence? And I was like saying, wow, toot your own horn as if you just landed on this planet. And so it's just like, Naomi, I'm thinking everything you've said today talks about building towards excellence. And so if you had that person sitting next to you in the room, what kind of small lecture might you give them about the beauty of public education?
Ooh. Well, first, I would meet them where they're at. I always try to meet people where they're at. And when we talk like that in education, when we talk solely about excellence, usually we don't have the depth of experience to understand that ultimately our education system is about learning in community. It's about being in community with one another. It's about excellence together, not excellence individually. And so I would move the conversation into the space about what it means and how you get to excellence. What does it mean to really be in relationship with a learner and their family and their community in order to support them fully? And then I would go from there to, what does that really mean underneath it? What are those values you're holding? And help them recognize that excellence is actually one of many values they're holding. Just like for us in our K-12 system, we hold excellence and we're accountable to the community. So we have to be thinking about the whole. And we have to, in my case, I have to be thinking about the margins. Who's at the margin of our system, who's not being supported? And how do we build that into the larger system? And I am also going to say, we are an authorizer of a charter school. And I love the idea, and I never pass up an opportunity to say this. I love the idea of innovation that can move because you have a smaller number of kids, because you can focus more narrowly, because you can essentially select the kids that come to your program in some cases, right? It gives you an ability to narrow your focus. And I love to learn from folks who are doing that. Love to learn from them. Like, how are they bringing excellence into their classrooms? And is there something there that I can learn from that we could think about? What does that look like at a larger scale? What does that look like in a system that's accountable to the whole community, not just the parents of our program, right? So I'd probably go in that direction with the conversation.
Naomi, I love your answer. Naomi just agreed to co-author a response to the Washington Post article today. Thank you, Naomi. That was
I would gladly do that.
Yeah, beautifully said, and a lot more patience than I introduced it with. So thank you for that. So I have Michael Moore, is like a native son of Michigan, right? And he wrote a book years ago, I think it was called Dude Who Stole My Country. and he writes about Flint and he writes about Michigan. And sometimes I feel like, dude, who stole our country? And so this idea of losing the Department of Education, sometimes I react to say, who stole our country? Who stole our Department of Ed? And then on the other hand says, oh my gosh, but it's not so bad because you can get to innovation. Maybe this switch here is not so bad for us to think about because I actually grew up before the Department of Education. So I'm just curious from
Yeah,
your position. Go ahead. Go ahead. Lady, you want to add to that? I just,
yeah. I
then I was
mean,
going to,
I think it comes. No, go ahead, more. Go ahead.
I'm just curious from your position, serving the districts in the charter school, how you feel about this switch that's occurring. Is it good, bad, indifferent, a mixed blessing? Where do you come out on this? Uh-oh. Is it the part that we might have to edit later?
No, no, we're fine. I'm trying not to put qualifiers like good, bad, or indifferent on it.
You're so
I'm
much
definitely not
You're
indifferent.
so much better than I am at that.
Like fundamentally, at the core of the Department of Education, it's a question of equity. Is every kid in this country getting the education they deserve? And if you look at what they do, it's a check and balance constantly on specific populations of people and kids to make sure that they're getting the services they deserve. That's if I get underneath all of it, right? Whether it's Pell Grants, whether it's special ed funding, whether it's support through the Office of Civil Rights, all of it goes to the idea of who's not being served by our system and how we're going to make sure they're served well at the core. So I don't like anything that takes away any of the checks on us as systems that demand us to be better at serving more kids. Like, I think that's really, really, really important. Is it an opportunity for innovation? Yeah, but we have to start working on that right now. I learned from the pandemic that pandemic was a wonderful opportunity for innovation. We didn't have the capacity, the time, and the energy to innovate because we were so busy trying to navigate all this uncertainty in the moment. And so I just wonder if there is going to be innovation or reconstruction on the other side. Hopefully there's another side. What is that going to look like and who's going to help lead that effort? Who's visioning that? Who's thinking that? That's where my head is going right now, is like, where's that group that's thinking really, really deeply about how we serve all kids and how we do it, not just at each state, but how we create something nationally that holds us to that same standard.
That's really well said. By the way, again, I've been around a little bit longer than both of you, but in 1976, do you know what piece of federal legislation was passed which had a profound impact upon all of us as educators? It's the Education for All Handicapped Act.
I was going to say it's IDEA was.
Yeah, IDEA came out of the 60s, but 70s, and at the time I reacted, something that you just said, Naomi, wow, the federal government had to step in and tell us what we already know we should be doing for kids. Isn't that a good thing? And at the same time, isn't it a shameful thing that we had had somebody do that? So that's that push me, pull me, I think that you captured so well.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Also worry. Can I just say one more thing?
Please,
I
please.
do worry, and across the country, I think different states are approaching education really differently. And I worry about that. I worry about that a lot.
Yeah. I mean, this is that tension of centralization versus decentralization. And, I think I shared this in a previous show, but I remember it was in 2010, did a 3-week road trip and picked up the local paper everywhere I went. And we drove from DC to Chicago, down the Mississippi, through Alabama, Georgia, up through the Carolinas. And, I remember sitting in the car reading these local papers and the local issues at play and wondering, this was as Common Core. Everybody was talking about Common Core, right? Can we do it? Can we not?
I remember.
And I just, We have been critical of public education since its inception. We had public ed pre-department, and I have dear friends at the department right now who have lost jobs, are furloughed, and my heart goes out to them. And I wrestle with this. What is the role for centralization versus decentralization? And I think you put it so eloquently of like the vision and the accountability partner. And time will tell where that sits, and does it go away or does it sit in a different department? The optimist in me is, of course, we need something and we're going to have something. But
By the way, Layla and Naomi, yeah, it was 1975. I just did a check on my
okay,
facts, not 1976. So, hey, but can I go back to the theme that Layla and Naomi, you were just talking about innovation? And it's so interesting you mentioned COVID and we didn't have time. Let's see, 1898, the Committee of 10 or about that. We're so far down the road with education and our history. What do you mean you didn't have time to innovate? You've had decades. You've had over 100 years to innovate. Well,
Yeah. Well, for me, I have not stopped a minute of my professional career trying to innovate. And I've chosen to do it from inside the system as opposed to innovating through a company outside the system or from a community-based organization. So I take it really seriously. And I think about my mom. She was a school board for years and years and years, and she would always remind me, education is an institution and we need it to be stable. That's why you're always fighting the stability and the status quo, because we count on it as an institution that provides stability in our community. She would remind me of that. So when I think about innovation, I think, how can we be a trusted institution for people in communities, right? It's an important, trusted institution. They trust their children with us all day, all week, right? But at the same time, how can we adjust internally or inside the system? And we need outside pressure to do it. You can't do it by yourself inside. You need the outside pressure in order to actually shift your system. It's more like a mirror of the larger community. So I think about, okay, what's happening in the larger community? What's happening? Where are we headed? That can give me insight into something we need to be adjusting now inside the system, knowing it's going to take us 5 or 10 years to get that thing to happen. So it might be a way of thinking about professional learning, which is what we did in our county. Instead of doing one-shot PD here and there, we started to build these networks of teacher leaders, supporting them over multiple years so that they can be a strong anchor around that instructional innovation within their districts. Takes years to build that. Or like building a teacher pipeline, where I've invested a lot of energy, because I think it's taking years. It's going to take years to adjust our system so that that is an accepted and normal kind of way of becoming a teacher. But I think it's essential, like I was saying earlier, it's essential for us to adapt into the future. So innovation for me isn't always the big flashy thing. It's that internal structure that you're adjusting and the ways of thinking that you're adjusting over time so that you have more kids served better by the system. I'm obsessed with what it means to serve kids that are not served well, like kids on the margins of our system. We just had a celebration in our jail for the young people in jail who just graduated from high school and who just earned their GED or other really important certification, certificates of some kind. I'm going to be thinking about the 9 kids or the 20 kids in the jail or young adults in the jail as much as I'm going to be thinking about that really impacted child with their special needs, another group that we serve, right? Or I'm going to be thinking about that young family that just immigrated here, doesn't speak English, and we're trying to help them access early childhood services. Always looking for how do we make sure we're serving the kids that we don't serve well now.
I
Hey,
think
Leo, we need to be a little bit cautious. We're getting close to the.
I know. And so I do want to get to, you reminded me of an article that I just dug up. I want to hit on a few things and wrap us into the last 5 minutes of our Now What, So What. So Mort brought us back to the 70s. And I think it just reminds us how young our education system is and the way that we think about education has evolved. So I found this statistic. As recently as 1970, the high school completion rate was 55%. And then in 2017, 90% of Americans aged 25 and older had a high school degree. And what we've been talking about today, I think is perfectly captured. I want to read you the last 3 sentences of this article. It was published by the Center on Education Policy, George Washington University. Many schools are struggling to meet this goal of ensuring a high-quality education for all, and their efforts are complicated by challenges and changes unknown to earlier generations. The reasons why public schools came into being, preparing people for jobs and citizenship, unifying a diverse population, and promoting equity, among others, remain relevant, even urgent. Public schools reflect our values and influence our future. There are problems with public schools, to be sure. Addressing these problems will require different strategies than in the past and a national will to improve public education. And as I sit here and I was listening to the two of you the past few minutes, I had to dig this up because it just brought me back to what I think eloquently captures what you're describing. This innovation, we have to have webs and networks, right? More that whether we have federal guidance or not, I'm going to come back to what Naomi said earlier. The only people who can change the system are those within the system. And for me, that's the hope that I'm going to walk away with from this conversation, that it's not people here in my backyard in DC. It's everybody out in the buildings and out in the field doing the work that can change this and have the will to meet our students' needs. So that's my now what, so what. Mort, do you want to close this out?
I do. Naomi, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to what I'm about to say because you're closer now than Layla and I, even though she's still a parent. I'm a grandparent. I was having a conversation with our youngest daughter yesterday, whose parent, she and her husband are parents of a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old in New York City in the Upper West Side, right on the edge of Harlem. So they're really beautiful mixed community. And she was talking about how they might overreact as parents. That, this helicopter parent attitude, and that, can you really allow your kids to go play with other kids if they're not supervised? Can you really let them go out and do this or go shopping at a store? And she said, it's not a safe world out there. So I said, oh, really? It's in quick search. And so here's the quiz as we go through the now what, so what. Have child abductions and that sort of awful behavior improved or lessened, or is it increased or lessened in the past 50 years? Are there more incidents or fewer incidents of child abduction than that kind of awful behavior? You know the way I'm asking the question, what the answer is. It's safer today than it was 50 years ago. There are fewer abductions. There are fewer and fewer. It might be because we overprotect our kids. We watch, we're more careful about it. But the point was so interesting with her about perception. And so Layla, it goes to this issue of perception of public schools. It goes to the question of excellence, Naomi. It goes to the question, are we really doing well? And so as we end, I want to give you the last word in terms of what you're hearing out there for the now what, so what. How do you address those perceptions which are not always grounded in reality or fact?
Well, my so what is it means that we need to be in community with one another. So we know one another and we're creating the future we want, right? The future is not set. We get to define it, and we get to define it together. And so I would say, and what I love to do in my area is, how do we come together around these big challenges, and let's tackle it together? All of us, let's tackle it together. If you feel like you're part of a community, you know that it's safe. You know it's a learning community. You know excellence is at the heart of it.
So it's respect and discourse and exchanging and learning to be good listeners and good conversations and respecting the other person and try to figure out what's going on and find common ground.
And taking action from all of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Naomi. You're just a wonderful person to talk to. This has been great. Hey, Layla, maybe we should just extend this conversation another 45 minutes to an hour. Naomi's been
It was me and Layla. We would be doing that.
Naomi, it has made my afternoon and my week getting to have this time with you. Thank you so much for sharing the great work that you're doing in Michigan and your view of the current landscape. I value you as a fellow change agent. To our audience, make sure that you subscribe to the show so you get alerts when we've launched new episodes. Please go to the K-12 Change Equation website and share comments, questions. We use that information to guide the show. And we will be back here and talking to y'all soon. Bye, everyone.